What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another one, guys. Hey, we are continuing looking at these Indianapolis Colts free agents. Today, we are talking about cornerback Kenny Moore. We talked about this when we were looking at the free agents in general, talking about guys the Colts should re-sign or let walk. And I think I made this statement, and maybe you did as well. Like, if there's one player on offense, Michael Pittman Jr., who we already talked about, be sure to go check out that video. If there's a player on offense and a player on defense, Kenny Moore would be the other guy that we would say for the Indianapolis Colts. It's a high priority. The Colts bring him back. I mean, this guy, so good. Homegrown guy for the Indianapolis Colts. Talk to me about Kenny Moore. Talk to me about what he's meant to this team, really, since coming into the Indianapolis Colts after being undrafted. And all the stuff that he has provided for this team and just him in general in 2023 and moving forward.
Well, yeah, like you said, an undrafted guy brought in by the Patriots and then eventually brought in to the Indianapolis Colts after not cutting it with the Patriots. And it's funny because Kenny Moore is one of the few guys that has ever gone against the Ballard mold. Like, even Ballard was openly admits the fact that, he was apprehensive on even bringing Kenny Moore in because Kenny Moore was, not the prototypical guy that he typically goes for, especially from a physical standpoint. Kenny Moore is a lot smaller than your prototypical Ballard corner that we typically see. But I mean, he has been just nothing but a overall great player, Cody, ever since he has been an Indianapolis Colts. Has never missed any significant time. The worst season that he's had from a games played standpoint was 11 back in 2019. And even then was still having a relatively solid year in giving everything that he had. Just had a few injuries here and there that popped up. But he has just been another guy that has just always been a guy that has a great smile, always doing stuff in the community, just an honest guy that has just put a lot of things on the table for Indianapolis. And, we talked about last year going into the 2022 offseason. That was back when, Kenny Moore was hoping that he would get an extension from Chris Ballard ahead of time because he said, look, I just made the Pro Bowl. This was my best season by a long shot, so I was like, just give me an extension here now because, I want to be here. I want to be able to do this stuff for you guys. But I feel like you guys should give me an extension now because I showed you what I'm capable of. And obviously, he still had a little bit more time on his contract. 2022 had a really down year. So did a whole bunch of people. But of course, we kind of chalked that all up to a couple different things. One of them being, new defensive coordinator and Gus Bradley. And then, of course, we kind of figured the contract disputes that were going on might have also had something to do with it. And, he did have a few lingering injuries that were happening in 2022. He did miss 5 games that year. So he definitely was not 100%. But here you are in 2023, and you're wondering how was Kenny Moore going to respond. And albeit he hasn't had the best year of his career, but it has turned around almost a complete 180 in what you have seen from Kenny Moore this year. I mean, every statistic, for the most part, outside of the completion percentage that he gives up, every other statistic has improved in a big way. So it's no doubt that Kenny Moore has really resurged himself and has put himself in a good position to be able to help this Colts defense moving forward. And it was really great to see Kenny Moore play well this year.
Yes, it was. And especially because of how young your cornerback room was. I mean, Derek, at the end of the season, and for a good chunk of the season, the Colts were starting 2 rookies on their outside. And so Kenny Moore was the only guy that had really any experience in that cornerback room that played, valuable snaps for this team. And so just the fact that you had that guy in there that was kind of that veteran leader, he'd been in there, he'd been in this system for a year, he'd been with this organization for a number of years. I think, like you said, all those things that, he did extremely well. And then obviously his play, bouncing back from where it was in 2022. I think he was just so valuable to what this team wanted to do. And, that Carolina game where he had 2 pick sixes in the same game, he pretty much single-handedly won you that game from those crazy timely turnovers that he had. But yeah, he was one of the best players in the NFL at his position at the slot corner. And he's just so extremely valuable, Derek. And we saw when he missed a few games, that really similar to the other guys we've talked about, how much the defense suffered when Kenny Moore wasn't out there. Because they don't really have that backup slot guy. They don't really have that backup nickel corner, if Kenny Moore gets banged up or something. So he's insanely valuable to what the Colts do. And he obviously had a great year. And so for all those reasons, I think you look at it and you say, this guy's a leader in the locker room. He leads by example, and he goes out there and he plays hard every single snap. And he's just such a great role model and such a great player for this team and for this organization. And I think when different players, they look at a guy like Kenny Moore, like you mentioned, undrafted out of Valdosta State, comes into the Colts, really at the middle of the 20, I think it was either the middle or the beginning, but started playing, down the stretch in 2017. And then in 2018, boom, all of a sudden he's a full-time starter and he hasn't relinquished that since. And so that's just I think a great story about how it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, where you go to college. If you work hard and you put your nose to the grindstone and you play well and you perform, like you can have a spot on an organization for a long, long time. And so I think it's just a great story, a great underdog story from Kenny Moore. I always remember, Derek, that I always will say if there's one claim to fame I have with Kenny Moore, it's I was at the game where he recorded his first career interception with the Colts. Nobody remembers the game, but it was a Thursday night game against the Denver Broncos where the Colts let Brock Osweiler, of all people, go and beat them. But I remember that game because Kenny Moore specifically had his first career pick. Wearing the number 42, if you remember, before he made the switch. And so, yeah, just a guy that has been such a model of consistency with this organization. And, even when he hasn't played well, I really don't feel like he's made a lot of excuses, even when he's played injured. He has all the reasons to at times. But I think I love what he did this year. He went out and he said, if I want a new contract with Indy, and obviously I want to stay here, I got to go out there and I got to perform, and I got to put 2022 behind me. I think it's just a great role model especially for young players, to see a guy like Kenny Moore, see the struggles, see the hardships, but see him overcome them ultimately. And I think that's a guy, Derek, that you want in your locker room. So absolutely love Kenny Moore, everything he means for this team and for this organization. And I think he's a lock, Derek, to bring back. I mean, this dude was literally just on the side of Lucas Oil Stadium like a couple weeks ago they put him up. So I don't think there's any question he's going anywhere.
Yeah, when you talk about what it means to be an Indianapolis Colt, that Kenny Moore is one of them. And, I think it tells a lot for how much he struggled. I mean, us Colts fans of recent know this. Like, Kenny Moore was not himself last year. I mean, he was bad in 2022. And then here we are in 2023, just to see him rebound. And I think that's important because a guy, if we were going to see that downtrend, Cody, then we were going to see it again in 2023. But we didn't see that. We saw it happen. We saw him get so much better. And I think that is such a great thing for Ballard just to understand, okay, he does have it locked in. He knows what he needs to do. And just to give some more perspective on some of the stats that Kenny Moore has had, when he became a full-time starter in 2018, outside of 2022, Cody, when he did not record an interception at all, has never had a season where he hasn't had at least 2 interceptions. So, I mean, obviously a turnover guy, has had at least 80 tackles in at least 3 of his last 4 seasons. So, he's been incredible. He's had the second most tackles this year of his entire career this year, from a sack perspective and interception perspective, was tied for the third most in a season. Most touchdowns that he scored in a season. He obviously had those 2 against the Carolina Panthers. He pretty much won the game for Indianapolis in that one, if you remember that. So, I mean, and to go into perspective of it again, he is only 28 this year. He's still a relatively young guy. He has not hit that age where you start to worry about whether or not he's still got it. I mean, it's obvious he still has it because he really turned it around, and he may not be his 2021 self anymore, Cody, or maybe even beyond that. But no doubt that Kenny Moore still has it. And from a overall perspective of especially the slot corner guys, from overall stats, he was the best slot corner in the NFL again this year. And it feels like we've been saying that every year over the last 4 years, except for this last year in 2022.
Yeah. Yeah, he's been, like you said, a model of consistency with just all the things that he does. You mentioned the tackles, the sacks, the interceptions. This guy's just around the football. He just makes plays for this team. And so, yeah, like you said, only 28 years old. So, I mean, a multi-year contract. And even for some corners, they play into their 30s. So I think Kenny Moore still got a lot left in the tank. And it's great to see. The fact that he's kind of the veteran and he's only 28 kind of speaks volumes to how young this cornerback room is. But, definitely you don't let a leader like that and a player like that out the door. You just don't. You bring him back, and, he wanted to get paid a couple of years ago, and he backed it up this year. So I think you look at overall in Kenny Moore's career, he's definitely a guy deserving of an extension and deserving to be an Indianapolis Colt for the foreseeable future. So absolutely, Chris Ballard, bring him back, no question in my mind.
Yeah, so of course, what you want to talk about, and we kind of talk about this with every single one of these players that we're breaking down, is, you kind of start wondering about what that contract, right? Because he had that 4-year contract worth $33 million. So he was getting $8.25 million every year. And it only makes sense, Cody, that he's going to want to get more on an average annual scale. No doubt I doubt he gets a 4-year contract out of Ballard. Probably gets a 2 or a 3-year contract because, like you say, he's going to be 29 this year. So you don't want to have him turning 33, 34 years old when he's done playing, because you don't know where it's going to go from there. But no doubt that you're going to see a multi-year deal here with Kenny Moore moving forward. Now, the ultimate question is how much per year are we looking at here? So, I mean, you look at what Stephon Gilmore just got from Indianapolis last year, right? And he got that 2-year contract worth $20 million. So that's $10 million, and that would put him at 19th overall in the most money that a corner is getting. Do you have a feeling that him being that slot guy is going to make a difference in how much money he gets per year in comparison to some of these other guys?
I don't know if it will. I mean, just because I think slot's even more valuable in certain ways because the Colts have 2 outside guys. So I don't necessarily think it will necessarily mess with the contract so much because Kenny Moore, he's a good football player. At the end of the day, that's what he is. He's just a good player. Well, he thrives obviously in the slot. He can do a little bit of everything. So I don't think necessarily that it'll mess with the contract because the Colts obviously have been comfortable in the past paying him some good amount of money for the time. So no, I'm not concerned about that really at all, to be honest with you.
I don't believe that we're going to see a situation where he's going to hit Darius Slay money, where Darius Slay is making $14 million a year. I don't think that we see that kind of contract, but I could see something around like James Bradbury type contract where, or in between James Bradbury and Dante Jackson, where you're getting around like $12 million a year.
Sure.
What do you think? What do you think's the max number that you would give Kenny Moore? Obviously, like we said, it's not going to be a long-term contract. It's going to be more of an intermediary contract.
Yeah. So how much was was James Bradbury getting? Out of curiosity,
the James Bradbury contract that he signed over last offseason was a 3-year contract worth $38 million.
Okay.
And
So that's
obviously he
roughly,
had just came off of that career year that he was having with the Giants before he, came to Philadelphia. So
yeah. So that's what, 12
that's
something
12
around there,
points. That is
12 point
12.6
something.
million a year.
So I probably wouldn't go more than that, to be honest. I'd probably say 12-ish is kind of where I'm at. I think that's a fair deal. And he's getting paid like one of the top corners. He's, it's not like he's breaking the bank as being the best, the most expensive corner out there, but I think he's getting good money for what he's produced. So I would say probably around there is where I'm good at, as far as maximum. What about you?
Yeah, I would say that 12 million is that number that I'm trying to go with.
Yeah.
If it comes down to being within another million or so, I'm not gonna be too worried about it because, like I said, it's gonna mainly be one of those things where it's gonna be a shorter contract. And when that cap increase hits next year with all these new TV marketing deals and whatnot, when that cap goes up by near like 50 million each team, you can make it in the contract where he makes less money this year off of that contract, but he can earn more in 2025. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
worry too much about that.
Ballard seems to be an incentives guy, so I could see something like that where it's like
Yeah,
we'll pay
yeah.
you up front a little bit less, but like you can earn this with this type of play and stuff like that.
Which is
So I
kind of
could see
funny
that.
because, for the long term contracts, Ballard has been pretty good about front loading contracts. He did that mainly with
Mhm.
DeForest Buckner's, where, you front load it off the beginning. And then, that way in the final years, when you're getting near the end of that contract, then you start going into different territory and you can, fluctuate a few more things. But since
Sure.
you're Kenny Moore and you're having a somewhat shorter contract and you kind of want to maybe try to bring in some more guys to help with that, then that's what I would say about it.
That would make sense. Yeah. Yeah. I would be all right with that.
But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Kenny Moore, he has been a model of consistency. He's by far and away, Cody, the best secondary player you have right now, easy. And he's just a guy that you want to have out there because he knows how to play football, man. And it just makes the total sense to make sure that he's back there for at least the next couple years. And we know how he feels about Indianapolis. He wants to be in Indianapolis. So let's make it happen.
Yep. Exactly. Bring him back. 100%.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Let us know your thoughts on Kenny Moore and if you think we should bring him back or not. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Let us know your thoughts. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, Colts.